I'd hoped my last video would have been the last one I had to do, just like I've hoped many of the blog posts and blog entries I've written were going to be the last one, but they never are. And sure enough, something dawned on me today that coincides with my last video. And there are a few other points that I want to make as well that I thought that I should make a video of, because for whatever reason it's more effective than writing on my blog. Why that is, I don't know. But anyway, and I've written about this on my blog, but I just put it together. My first year in Columbus, when I was a student at Ohio State, I worked at Red Lobster as a waiter, and there was a waitress there whose name I don't recall. She had blonde hair. She had a kind of a gravelly voice. She was moderately attractive. You know, her face was okay. It wasn't great, but she had a very shapely, lean body. She had been an athlete, I think, and she was in excellent shape. You know, she wasn't skinny. She had very good muscle tone. And she'd been some sort of athlete, volleyball maybe, I'm not sure. But anyway, she invited me out for drinks one night at Papa Joe's, and we went out, and a friend of hers might have been there. I don't recall exactly. Like, she was really going out of her way to get me intoxicated. We were doing shots of tequila, etc. And, you know, that night we went to her house, and I slept there. And I don't remember what happened that night. I don't think anything happened that night. But the next day was, I think, the first Ohio State game of the year. Okay. And, you know, it was a very leisurely day. It was a Saturday, obviously. And I don't think she had to work that day. I don't think I did either. And we were just kind of hanging out. And the game came on, and we were sitting there watching the game. I think it was Arizona State. It was Arizona. And I was sitting in a chair that had kind of a lounge chair, like a lazy boy type chair, watching it. And she sat on the floor right in front of the chair and kind of like put one of her arms up on my knee. Okay. And, you know, I don't even remember if we made out the night before. But this was happening, and the next thing you know, she started rubbing me, and etc. And I was just watching the game, thinking, "Wow, how about this? Columbus is great." And you know, 5 minutes later, she was performing oral sex on me, and like the woman who I had a similar encounter with on spring break at Disney World, she was very proficient at it. You know, she was very, very good at giving oral sex. And as I said, she had a very lean, athletic build to her body. She had great muscle tone. She had very nice skin. But her face wasn't perfect, you know? So it popped into my head today, and then I thought back to the Disney thing, and I thought to the New York encounter in the bar. You know, I think when you think about pornography, you think, well, it mainly goes on in Florida and in the Los Angeles area, right? Probably Central Florida, I don't know, South Florida, probably all of South Florida, and the Los Angeles area. You know, I think the industry in the U.S. probably started in Los Angeles, right? Wasn't that in Boogie Nights? But Ohio State's a big school. It's one of the 5 biggest schools in the country. I think the enrollment is always right around 55,000. I think there are only 2 or 3 bigger schools in the country. One of them is Central Florida, which I guess is in Orlando. I'm not sure. But anyway, I've thought about all these things and her and how everything that happened. And, you know, I wouldn't be surprised one bit if she was appearing in pornography on the side as well. You know, being a waitress in Columbus doesn't pay that well. And the thing was, after that day, okay, she totally blew me off. I had no idea what was going on. It's like, wow, this great sex, and then, you know, she kind of acted like it didn't happen. I thought, wow, that's really strange. You know, it's so odd. So that was how that went, and you know, it occurs to me that the notion that encounter the spring break encounter at Disney World, and the filmmaker and his actress who I met in a bar in New York are probably all, very likely all three, connected. And then, it didn't even occur to me until I was recording this video that Central Florida and Ohio State are both two of the biggest schools in the country where you're likely to have a large pool to choose from. So if there's, any of that stuff that goes on outside of Southern Florida and Southern California, it's going to be at the place where there are probably the largest colleges, right? The other thing I wanted to talk about is one other aspect of the way that I'm being tormented and tortured and examined and framed by this kind of invisible system that's all meant to be hard to believe. As I said, my thoughts are being monitored. What I look at is being monitored and policed. I've talked about how they can make you see things that aren't actually there by using digital technology, and I'm going to tell you one other example of that that's a really good one, which I didn't mention before. Everything I do is being policed, and it's all a follow-up to a setup of feeling lonely since a young age, which makes you impulsive. Okay, so first I'll tell you about one other example of digital glitch face, which I didn't talk about in the last video. And together with my clock and the woman on the street whose face changed my way to digital glitch, it's because of these three. I know that they're doing what they're doing, and as I said, they do it with. It's done with time. It has to do with time travel with how they do it. I have a new workfare assignment now where I'm now doing it in North Beach, but previously I was in the Mission at the corner of 24th and Mission, and there were a few other people there who were working along with me, who were there purposely to just torment me and torture me and screw with me. There was the one guy, he was in the Air Force or whatever, and they say all these weird things. They get you by yourself, and everything they do to me is based on isolating the person. And they've been working to drive me to a state of isolation since I was a very young boy. But anyway, there was a woman there named Sita, who was doing my work for a while. And like so many others involved, she wore black and white. And I don't remember if I ever saw these black and white people before I came to San Francisco. I don't think I did, but I can't recall. All these things started in Ohio overtly in like mid-2008, But I don't recall seeing these black and white people before that. It's mostly overweight women and feminists that were following around in Ohio. I think neo-Nazis. But anyway, here's a picture of Sita. And that's Now there was an incident one day where it wasn't an incident, just a little occurrence at the workfare site where I asked our boss, a guy named Fernando, about one of the supplies we need. I think it was gloves. We wear rubber gloves when we're out doing these things, sweeping the streets. And Sita was standing between myself and the truck, as was Fernando. And one of the things that she did a lot was she acted really bossy around me. Okay, that's part of what they do. They isolate you so you're in this position, and then they harass you and stalk you and act really arrogant and bossy. And it's all this kind of mental and emotional attack. That's all based on isolating the person. Now, when I asked Fernando about I told him we needed more gloves because there were none in the box, and we needed to get some out of the truck. And she intervened, and as if to answer for him, she kind of turned her head, made a weird gesture, and then held up her finger and pointed to the truck as if, I'm trying to go over this, as if she was directing me. I asked the boss a question, and she interrupted and answered me, which is part of the whole kind of thing they do to you to just make you feel like you're constantly being bossed by people who have no authority over you. And she went like that, real quick. And the reason I mention this is that when she did that movement with her hand, it was very awkward. There was just something herky-jerky, not right about it. Like it looked like a really cheaply done bad job of movie special effects, basically. I could tell that by the way she was turned and the way she did it, that it would have been uncomfortable for her. Okay, but it had to be really quick, and that's why they had to make it look that way. Okay, and it came out looking awkward because like she didn't like point directly at the truck, like sideways, like she was pointing up, and she went like that. And I think part of the reason they put the head turn in, like she looked in the opposite direction. It was really weird. And the reason that they added that was to fool me so that I wouldn't notice how hokey the fake arm was pointing to the truck. Okay. So that's just one other example I wanted to mention about, digital glitch face. It's those three instances that are very clear to me. One was where the woman's face actually changed by way of a digital glitch to a scowl looking at me. There's my clock and the way it, has digital distortion in it when I'm brushing my teeth. And there was this thing with Sita, who is one of those people who wears black and white and loves to act like they're my boss. Another important thing I forgot to mention about Sita is that all of a sudden one day, boom, there was a instant change in her personality, and all of those things she was doing because they had me isolated and drove into this position stopped. It was like there was suddenly a wholesale change in her personality, and it got to the point where we were just another couple people working at work fair together. It was really weird. And that reminds me of another important point that I'd made a video of, and then I decided not to post those two big long videos, but I'll mention it now because it really is important. I posted a video about anti-Christian brainwashing here on YouTube about where I talked about I showed a shot of the inside of a San Francisco bus that had very few ads on it, like it was almost bare, and there was a little white strip of plastic on the thing, like on the bottom edge of where those ads are on the top of the bus, that said, it was a disclaimer saying that, San Francisco municipal system, that the views expressed in the ads aren't necessarily theirs. And I hadn't noticed that before, and I guess that's all part of my Truman Show deal. All of this is right, so what I do, making these videos, etc., doesn't matter. So anyway, when I was shooting that video of that little strip with the disclaimer, I was facing the right of the bus. Okay, I was near the front. I was near the driver's seat. You saw that I panned the camera around and showed a shot of the bus and how there were very few ads. Now, while I was shooting it, pointing at that strip, behind me and to my left, okay, in the front seat on the bus, immediately behind the driver, the best seat for that person to be in so that I would not have gotten a shot of it at that point, was an Asian woman sitting there. Okay. Now, when I got done shooting the clip, I turned and faced forward in the bus. Okay. And, like any normal, well, with me, it's different. Most people walk through life not paying attention to people around them. You're content, etc. Well, as I said, they made me like a motion sensor and hyper curious and very nervous, which is all part of this kind of mind control torment system they've done to me. So naturally, I'm compelled to look at every person I see. And so I glanced down at her and then just looked forward again. And I guess I must have been looking right at her. Maybe I saw her out of my peripheral vision. I don't know. I have very good peripheral vision. And I swear she was just sitting there like she was minding her own business. And as if, she didn't know me, didn't know anything about me. Okay, and I was looking at her, or I must have been looking right at her. Or at least partially. And I swear to you, she kind of did this thing where it was like she snapped into another mode, and she went, "How tall are you?" And that's what they do to me. Okay, one of the ways they try to irritate me is by asking about my height, which isn't something that bothers me, except for the fact that they're doing it intentionally. When I was younger, people asking me about my height bothered my family and friends more than it bothered me. Several times I had family and friends saying, "How can you stand it?" Whatever. But they think it bothers me and they keep on doing it. But what I'm saying is, that woman very clearly there was again, like Sita, there was an instantaneous, and I saw the moment it happened, an instantaneous wholesale change in like her mode. Okay. She was just not paying attention to anything, just minding her own business. And I actually saw her face move, her head kind of shook a little bit. It was like she kind of woke up out of some kind of trance and went, "How tall are you?" And I forget what I answered. I think I said something like, sometimes I say I don't answer height-related questions. And their goal is they penalize me if my response to these questions isn't exactly proper, exactly what's prescribed. And I said something like, "I don't answer height-related questions," I forget. And I added something about how I'd been the subject of socialist anti-American brainwashing. And she replied, "Oh, but can't we all get along?" And that is a fantastic example of what's a major part of the whole brainwashing thing, is to accuse you of being divisive, etc. When in fact the whole thing is an attack on the United States and an attack on freedom. But when I actually saw that kind of wholesale change occur, I think it was very important. And as I said, since I was talking about Sita, that reminded me of it. There's one other aspect about the strange digital technologies that are being used to torment me and that are very, very highly intrusive, that are invisible and are all kind of a product of this lifelong setup I've been subject to since I was a little kid with Lonesome the Dog, which makes you impulsive, etc. As I said, what I look at is being monitored and policed. My thoughts are being monitored and policed. Everything I do is being monitored and policed. Now, I've linked a lot of my experiences to cults. I've been forced to do this research on my own, and I've seen some things that are common with what's happening to me to certain cults. And one thing that I found out about cults is that they do indeed try to create a feeling of omniscience over their subjects. Okay, and I've thought to myself more than once before I read that, wow, these people are trying to play God with me. Okay, and because of the digital glitch face examples I've told you about, the woman's face, Sita at work fair, my clock, is how I know that it's not what's going on, because I am quite confident. Okay, I am quite confident that God doesn't need digital technology to make people see things that aren't there, to make things that he wants to happen. Okay, I'm quite sure about that. Now, I can see other ways that God's operating in my situation. But if you want to know an example of a way that God uses human beings to have an effect, I'll tell you one. Okay, and it doesn't include any digital technologies. My father Joseph had one brother. His name was Anthony. He was about 8 or 10 years younger than him, I think. And he died young. He died in, I think it was February of 1986. And I'll mention parenthetically here that when I got confirmed into the Catholic Church, I wanted to take Anthony for my confirmation name. But my mother wanted me to take Francis, which is the name of her brother, who had already passed away from ALS. So my dad was really happy that I wanted to take Anthony, and so was Michael Tony. But he said, do that for your mother. So I did, of course. And I remember when he told Uncle Tony about it, he was real happy about it too. My sister wanted me to take Simon, which wasn't anything that I might have considered, but it makes me wonder, maybe she's possessed by Jackie O, and Jackie O is a Paul Simon fan. That's crazy. But anyway, it was kind of an issue, like when my confirmation name came up. I remember a lot of people had input. But anyhow, my uncle died young in February of 1986. It was very sudden. And my grandmother found him, and he had lived right across the street from her. And they saw each other, I think, every day. And she was absolutely devastated. I'd never seen anybody like that, and I've never seen anybody like that since. except for one of the guys in town who's a local cop whose son died young. She was really, really just absolutely just what you might expect from her youngest of her two sons. And I remember when the following Christmas rolled around, she said she didn't want any gifts, and that we weren't going to have Christmas in her house anymore on Christmas Eve. The night of Christmas Eve was like the big, great kind of alternate family holiday of the year. We had Christmas Day at our house, but Christmas Eve was at her house with my two cousins, and in her this big beautiful dinner in her dinette with stained glass window and everything. So that ended that year, etc. And despite the fact that she insisted that she didn't want any gifts, I decided I was going to get her one anyway. And I went to the mall to take a look around, and then at the Eastwood Mall in Niles, I don't know if they still do it anymore, but there were local and regional vendors who would come and set up tables with little knickknacks and figurines to sell for Christmas holiday. And I found one of an angel there, and it was like standing, just like you might expect, and it looks a little bit like this one. Now, I didn't make the decision to do what I did until I got to Grandma's house that day we went to visit, which was probably during the week before Christmas. I decided in advance that I wasn't going to wrap it, because I thought if I wrapped it, that would give her an excuse to just put it in a drawer and forget about it. So I didn't wrap it. I had it in my pocket, and we entered the house, and it was my dad, myself, and maybe my sister. And I was the last one to enter, and I kind of straggled a little bit. And I entered the door, and I looked to the right, and off to the right when you entered her house, then there were a couple chairs and like this nice little round Italian-style kind of coffee table. And she had a round doily on top of it, centered perfectly, as you might expect. And I kind of peeked around the corner into the kitchen to see that my dad had already gone in there. And I reached in my pocket real quick and pulled out that angel, and I set it in the center of that doily facing forward. And didn't say anything, And of course, before the end of that visit, it got discovered, And my dad quizzed me about it, and I was like, "No, man, I don't know anything about it," And I played it. I must have played it off pretty well because he believed me. My sister kind of gave me a look out of the side of my eye, like, she was wondering what was going on. And I think she might have said that she thought it was me, but I must have played it off well because I think everybody, they weren't buying her suggestion. And they believed me. And, in the months after that, I felt a little guilty about it because I thought I was playing God, But in hindsight, I can see that, it was for a very, very good reason. And that's exactly the way that I suspect God would work through a human being to have a direct effect that he wants to have, as opposed to through, digital glitch face type technologies. And that little angel figurine did in fact have a very good effect on Grace. Like, she was in mourning for many years to come, but this kind of end of the world tragic despondency did change after that. And maybe there are some people who might confirm that for you. I don't know. But all I can tell you is that you people who are trying to play God with me aren't fooling me one bit. There's one more aspect of the very strange, intrusive technologies that are being used to torment me and frame me and portray me in a way that is very inaccurate. And as I can't reiterate this enough, that the reason they get away with what they're doing is that A, they've isolated me, and B, they portray me as insane, which I'm positively not. And that's how they do all these things. Okay, I had Lonesome the dog when I was a kid, which was meant to impair my impulse control. Now, as I've mentioned, what I look at is being monitored and policed. All my movements are being monitored and policed. My thoughts are being monitored and policed. I've said that they transmit political indoctrination messages that are socialist and anti-American into my head while I'm sleeping in the middle of the night. Okay. There are little cartoons that they play that I guess are the product of a screensaver, which I've written about on my blog and in documents that I posted on Google Docs. They do all these strange things where they actually really get into your head and do these things from distance. And then in response, the people who are doing it, who I have to assume are local police, I'm not really sure, come and sit near me and say tormenting, taunting things like "you're never leaving here." They walk by me on the street and give me admonishing looks, and the way that it's all played off is to try to make me think that it's my conscience working on me, which is, again, the whole digital glitch face thing makes it so that I know that that's not the case. So anyway, all those things are going on. Now, the one other very strange thing that's going on that I assure you has nothing to do with my conscience is that they can actually manufacture strange dreams, which I think are used to test the person. Okay? Like they're trying to find out what's really on my mind. Okay. I've had a couple that were meant to bait me into a gay encounter where a guy was like face to face with me trying to kiss me, and I had to go like this. And I couldn't do anything to physically repel him because I've been labeled potentially violent and having anger issues, which is another thing I've been getting set up for. I've had other dreams that were set up to bait me into a pedophilia situation, and I'll tell you about one I had just last night. I was at a house where I'd never been before. It was strange. It was really, really messy. And I don't know why I was there. It was it had modern decor, very modern decorations. And for some reason, I was under the impression that it was my sister's house, which I know it's not. But I was there by myself. And my sister's daughter and one of her friends came in and said, "Uncle Johnny, we're hungry." And I said, "Oh, are you?" And I started scrambling, trying to find my wallet, to take them somewhere to eat. And I think the test was to see if I was going to, approach them or whatever. These ridiculous, silly things that they do. And I think I made the comment that, this house is like an extension of your mother's bedroom. You can't tell the difference between the neat things that she actually uses and the ridiculous clutter mess. But anyway, they do other things to bait me into compromising positions that are obvious ones that you'd end up in if you've been covertly manipulated into a state of having low impulse control. For a guy who's had his impulse control sabotaged from a very young age, what kind of problem do you think he might have? Take a wild guess. I've never had any addictions except for one partial addiction, which is something that I've had control of and dropped at different times. It was worse after Christine Ferrando, of course. But, it's something that they're trying to maintain for me. And they're getting really upset because I broke it, and I'm not one of these dirty, filthy basket cases walking around San Francisco like they're trying to turn me into. But anyway, I just wanted to add that that's one of the things that they're actually doing. It's meant to sound crazy. They actually manufacture weird dreams. And there are a few other ones that I don't remember the exact type of, but I know there's those three. They'll trot out like very scantily clad women with fantastic bodies to see what I'll do. They bait me into pedophilia situations, and they try to bait me into gay encounters that I have to go like this to, because I'm afraid to push them away because then they'll say I have anger issues and stop me from that. It's all meant to sound crazy. It's meant to sound paranoid. That's how they get away with it. I've been told twice that my whole life is an experiment. One last thing I want to mention, today is the Feast of the Transfiguration, and so naturally some things had to happen this morning and during the day. And some things have changed because of some, new T-shirts that I'm working on online, of course. Anyway, today, because I just walked by her office the other day, I went down to the office of an attorney here in town named Angela Alioto. Her husband was a mayor of San Francisco years ago. She's a Catholic. She runs a gift shop called Francis Rocks. It's near the St. Francis of Assisi Shrine, associated with the St. Francis of Assisi Shrine here in town. And I haven't gotten to meet her. But I went down there today to see if I could get in and talk to her about my situation. And it's really strange in San Francisco. You go to a lawyer's office, and I couldn't get in the door to get up into her office, but some guy came down to the door and said he worked with her, and he was an Asian guy. He was wearing a casual shirt, like kind of one of those wrinkly, like gray shirts, buttoned like mine is right now. I think he might have had jeans on and black and white tennis shoes. And I told him what was going on. I'm like, he said they don't take walk-ins, so he came down, and I said, well, I'm seeking representation because I've been the subject of anti-Christian brainwashing. And I gave him this information, and he came back and gave me a intake questionnaire. It was like 5 or 6 pages, and they usually deal with workplace stuff. But I figure since she's Catholic, she might be a good contact. So I went and filled it out and brought it right back. He came back down and got it, and I very clearly told him that I've been the subject of anti-Christian and anti-American brainwashing. But, while I was filling the thing out, I went and did it at Starbucks. And the guy in this following video made an interesting comment. Here's a quick clip of him. It's the guy in the black and blue striped shirt.
This guy right here in the blue and black shirt, he just said out loud while I'm filling this thing out, he goes, okay, thanks, we'll stop bothering you now, like he was making a joke to someone behind the counter.
That's a fantastic example of some of the strange things I experienced that are related to that King of Queens episode that I talked about when Spence was on the phone and he asked someone a question on the phone and the television next to him answered his question in a bizarre coincidence. Not only does that happen to me through the television in the lobby of my building, but it happens to me in public all the time. So here I am filling out the application for a pretty powerful Catholic lawyer in town, and this guy in a black and blue shirt comes in and says something about, okay, we're going to stop bothering you. I have those experiences all the time, and they manufacture a reason for it in strange ways, but they always speak very, very loudly. And it's difficult to catch them on video because I never know when it's coming. There have been a few times when I noticed some people that I thought were going to do it, and I actually do have a few clips of these people doing these things when they talk out loud. Kind of like the 2 guys at Starbucks who killed that bird in Vegas. But I've actually got some other clips of that stuff too. But anyway, I thought that was significant. I went down there today, and then boom, there's that guy. And then I went to church, and then stationed behind me came in 5 or 10 minutes after me with some girl who looked like a radical feminist wearing pink who didn't participate in Mass at all or go to communion. I've had this experience so many times since I've gone back to church here in San Francisco, where I go to church and then a woman comes in late, like maybe 5 or 10 minutes late, and sits the same way every time, two or three pews behind me, and maybe halfway down the pew away from me, kind of so they have a good view of what I'm doing. And they don't participate at all or go to communion, just like this woman didn't.
Now, Peter,